Hey everybody, welcome to the third episode of Jono Live There, the fantastic podcast where I, someone who's never lived outside of California, interviews my most traveled friend, Jonathan Chan. Jonathan, how are you doing?
Kia ora. Very well. And you? How's life?
Life is the same for the last 6 months.
Yeah,
Barely leave the 1 mile radius of my house and the grocery store, but it could be worse.
yeah. I mean, have you been able to appreciate the color of the walls and how there's a distinct tone of eggshell, which is a fucking color
Yeah,
apparently?
my,
I
my,
didn't
my
know
wall
that.
colors are pretty good. It's like that little off-white, so it's
Right?
it's a nice look. Even this week, I could barely go outside because California had fires caused
Yes.
by like extreme lightning. Like lightning set some
Yep.
fires in like the more deserted areas, and the air quality was terrible yesterday.
Wow, you got all the way there to the city.
Yeah,
That's oh yeah, we've heard about it. We've seen all the pictures on the news. So how affected are you guys in terms of um, not just the air quality, but how much of the bushfires have really affected people living in the cities, or is it really just a distinct reality that doesn't touch you guys as much?
I don't think like houses are burning in the city or anything like that. The main concern is air quality, but definitely people in the more isolated areas.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, you see them lose their houses. Like it's all on fire. It's on the news every day this week. It just caps off like a really tough time in California, especially with the quarantine. A lot of people lost their jobs, and this is kind of just
Definitely.
adding insult to injury. Now there's fires.
Yep. Said the least. And I mean, it's an annual event, right? That happens every year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there is like a fire season, but this one was unique because I think it was caused by lightning.
Yeah.
Lightning literally struck um, the
Right.
the nature, and then it caused a lot of fire.
Not so much the hot temperatures and strong winds then. It's just lightning sort of set it off.
It's probably a combination of that, but
Right. Okay.
the lightning was like kind of the igniter.
Wow. Yeah, man. We can empathize. I mean, over there in New Zealand, we don't have that, fortunately. I don't know if I can say haven't had that yet, but in Australia, definitely like, across the Tasman, you get that as well. It's pretty much the same phenomenon. I mean, you probably also heard about the biggest forest fires over there, right, last year?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's
Oh,
let's talk about so the premise of the show. Sorry for talking about California fires for the first 2 minutes,
no,
but
no.
like the premise of the show is to interview Jonathan about different portions of his life depending on what country he lived in. And today, as Jonathan hinted, we're going to be talking about the country that he spent most of his formative years in, New Zealand. Now, New Zealand has gotten a lot of great publicity since COVID started. I think out of any country in the world, New Zealand seems to be the country that everyone wants to live in because it's controlling the COVID problem the best. There's the fewest deaths and everything. Jonathan, are you proud of your country right now? It's like the jewel of Earth right now.
Okay, this is definitely an oxymoron, but I'd say I think we're all humbly proud. Of course we're happy that um, you know due to a amount of luck, I'd say, being isolated, right, in the middle of nowhere down in the Pacific, but also having the fairly high standard of living, which means that following the norms and let's say having a lockdown during the early parts of the crisis, right, actually was something feasible for most people, that they were able to to stay at home and carry out those measures effectively, right. And so most of all, having a culture, I guess, that was relatively cohesive, and having, I guess, people that has a you know I'll say a healthy relationship with the political class. That definitely really helped, because if you compare
So you're saying the
with
combination
yeah,
of the isolation of the country
yes, as
plus
well as
the smartness of them. I don't know
that's a good way to
the
put it.
common sense of the New Zealand population.
It's flattering, but I mean, that it really shows, like, the if anything, like this COVID crisis really kind of shows everything that's worked, and I guess more hasn't worked right until that point. Because you talk about common sense. we're lucky, right, that virtually everyone is educated enough, to be able to, follow the rules and know what's happening, and therefore work together. I guess to ensure that they were, under lockdown for the least amount of time possible, right? And again, I think we enjoy a certain cohesiveness, um, that sort of saw them, being able to, yeah, just to do it together, right, and get along and not sort of, for example, go against logic and science, and more importantly, the political class, because you see a lot of that happening in countries like, say, even, I mean, of course, the States, right, but also in Europe, where you see protests now from people who actually are so-called, what, negationists, people who deny that this thing actually is even happening, and
Yeah, I saw that on the news. Berlin in Germany
yeah,
was protesting it, and they seem like, I always thought that Germany was like the smartest country too,
yeah.
but it's probably like a
30,000
small
people
segment of the
apparently were out
population
there.
that are.
Yes, no, you're right about that. Yeah, I think there was like there were 30,000 people that were out marching. But having said that, by the way, I've got to put a little caveat on that. We had the same protest as well, I believe, yesterday, same day, if I'm not mistaken, of about 100 or so people that also, yeah, went out there to Aotea Square to protest.
There's 100 New Zealanders protesting. The
Thereabouts in
what are
Auckland,
they
anyways.
protesting? They're doing great.
You know, I guess that just like the the Christchurch shooting as well. Also being a current event because the terrorist actually got sentenced yesterday or the day before to life imprisonment. Anyways, just also trying to shed light on the fact that we're not sheltered from from, I guess, people from different political standpoints and ideologies, and aka crazy people. We're not safe from that as well, even though we're a little country. It's just, I think, a matter of scale. There are people like that though that are still there. So, but I think for the most part, like you said, we're lucky that that the combination of good leadership, good political leadership, and a culture that I think promotes people, being humble and being cooperative. I think, yeah, they managed to, I guess, set an example, which is a great thing for a little country of 5 million people, right?
Yeah, that's you should be proud. But that's another thing too. Like I think everyone's like, oh, New Zealand's doing great. They have this all under control. And then like, why can't America be like New Zealand? I think you just pointed out a big fact. New Zealand has 5 million people. That's like
Yeah,
smaller than the population of like LA. Not saying that LA is doing great either, but it's probably easier to make a bunch of rules and make sure everyone follows it if your country is the size of a one of the major American cities.
that is true. It's a matter of scale, and I mean, so people also then will go on the other hand, say like, oh, but that doesn't obviously condone, right? People not, I guess, having a long-term vision to work together and to be sensible, right? To, I guess, sacrifice certain so-called liberties to get out of this, as soon as possible. And I guess that just, again, sheds light on how I think culturally that I think decides a large portion of how many people actually um, do what's right, isn't it? Because in the States, I think if there's anything, and we talk about this more, I think we talk about the States. If there's anything that really stands out, not just to me, but really to anyone in the world, is how diverse, right? How there really is all kinds of people, and there's a place for anyone and everyone with any kind of belief. And it's if there's one place in the world that has that, it's the States. So I guess we all kind of maybe expected that
Yeah, I
um,
think it's harder to, because like a big part of like being safe during COVID is to like make sure your fellow man isn't hurt, because like a big thing is like wearing a mask, and like
yeah.
even though you're not showing symptoms, you wear a mask just in case that you actually have the disease. In America, unfortunately, like it's very self-centered because you you kind of don't see yourself in other people. You don't have the same empathy to other people that are not part of your group. But it seems like in New Zealand, everyone kind of just like we're all New Zealanders together. We're all the same. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I'll say that I think it's a matter of, again, it's a matter of extent and scale, because on one hand, yeah, I mean, I think we cannot compare ourselves to the freedom loving Americans that we we have come to know.
So you're saying there's no
And
freedom in New Zealand?
see, the thing is, yes, there is, and people obviously still have their own. Um, they still have this way of um, putting importance on freedom of expression and all that. But at the same time, I think it's the way that's done is sort of in a more measured way though, where um, I think it's probably still more important to you know to appear to have sense. I don't know, and to do it with a certain sense of humor as well. But then also just to to have a certain sense of grounding. I think to be sort of have your feet on the ground. I guess head on your shoulders. I think that's kind of more of what it means to be, I think, a Kiwi. To know that yes, come from a little country. And I think we don't have that certain right. I think to sort of go out and say, hey, this is how we do things, and this is how it's
So
supposed to be
who
done.
who
Giving a
are the
shit.
Kiwis?
But
Like so like New Zealand is a small country, like,
yeah,
and it's an English speaking country.
yes,
It used to be British rule. Who are the people that came to
that's
New Zealand?
that's
Because
probably a good
everyone
question
has the
to start off with.
stereotype that Australians, are the descendants of convicts or whatever that is. So, but
Yeah.
like New Zealand is the good country. Like who started New Zealand?
Oh, it's really flattering to say that. But no, yeah, probably glad to kind of just to go back a little and kind of define what Kiwis, who Kiwis really are, right? So, yeah, I guess fun. We do a fun little 30 second segment on history, right? So, yes, ex-British convicts were indeed, sent to Australia. But New Zealand, there, actually was first, I think, inhabited by Maoris, I guess, who came from Polynesia. So they came from Pacific Islands uh, to New Zealand, and so they were the first peoples, the indigenous people. You know, they call them the natives, I guess. In the states, you call them Native Americans, Native Indians, I guess. But anyway, that's kind of the New Zealand version. So, and then after that, British came. There were many traders and whalers, I'd say, that came to settle New Zealand. That was sort of in the 1800s, I'll say.
Is this
I'll say,
before or after Australia was like convict land or whatever it is?
I'm
Or is
not
it the
too
same
sure,
time?
but I'll say it's probably around the same period, if anything, because all I know, I guess, is, in terms of New Zealand history, is that in around the 1800s, the British starts coming to settle, and of course, it was starts off as business, and then later on, came more of them, and then in 1840, which is kind of the mark of our, unofficial Independence Day, because we don't actually, yeah, fun fact, we don't actually have an Independence Day that we celebrate, but we have the day called, the Treaty of Waitangi Day, which is the day that the British signed a treaty with the Maori people, with the Maori chiefs, right, on 6th of February 1840. So that thing marked the official, you know, date of
Wait,
colonization by
what
the
is this
British in
treaty?
New
The
Zealand.
treaty was saying like I can have your land now because I'm British.
It had three. What's the technical word for that? Uh, I forgot. But I guess three parts, right? And I think the part that I remember anyways from school was the part where the treaty consisted of sort of a fallen translation, I think, between English and Maori, because I think to the English people, obviously, the Maoris were going to give up their sovereignty, right, to the Queen. But I think in the Maori version, it was to do with governorship, right? That that yes, it will still be their land, it will still be, obviously their country, their resources, but they were, I think, seceding that power of governorship to the Queen, to the Crown. So I think there's always been disagreements, and therefore, up to this day as well, there's the tribunal, the Waitangi Tribunal, sorry, that was created, specifically to actually redress certain reparations, right, and certain, uh, you know, I guess, grievances, to do with violations of the treaty, right? So in terms of land, basically. But having said that, though, yeah, that from 1840, that pretty much marked the arrival of the British and the colonization, of guess, of the British. And so from then on, we went, how many years now? I guess 100 over years. Yeah, I mean, since then, I guess being, I guess, quote unquote, uh, um, I'll say,
So
I don't
so
know,
who are the British people that
maybe.
that wanted to come to New Zealand when it was established in 1840? Who wanted to come out down? down there and hang out with the Maori?
No, so again, like I said, there were many traders. I would say there were many traders, and then came settlers. And obviously, there was a huge whale and fur trade back then. Uh, sorry, whaling, and I think there was also a lot of I think seals as well. I'm not sure if anything. I might be a bit rusty on my history there, but it was like I remember that they first came for whaling and trading fur, and then later on as they settled. Funny thing is that come towards like the 20th century, beginning of the 20th century, definitely during the World War One period, a lot of the British actually, that had already been in New Zealand, they actually then came to see themselves as, you know, proper Kiwis, proper New Zealanders, because before that it was pretty much, them being British people living outside of Britain, living in New Zealand. So I think this whole idea of a national Kiwi identity, I think, came pretty much after World War One, which was actually our most involved sort of period in terms of world wars, even compared to World War Two. World War One, I think, was what we then are still taught now in school of being, I think, the most sort of defining period of history in terms of war, right? And New Zealand's role in wars. And so yeah, and then later on, of course, we've had immigration from other countries as well. So the first Chinese, for example, came, I think, actually even before. Sorry, I think around the same period actually about of the whole Treaty of Waitangi being signed, but they came out in the 1800s also, of course, in small quantities, right? More in terms of gold miners coming and then later on to settling. And then
There's
later
gold in
on,
New Zealand. Like so, like what convinced the Chinese people to come to a
again,
British
I mean,
colony?
it's just like anything. It was commercial, right? They came, for, for commercial purposes. They came actually first as gold miners, right? And then they didn't actually have the intention to stay. They wanted to go back eventually, but a lot of them ended up staying. And then they came obviously more and more to
So you actually
to
see
set
like
up business,
five
right?
generation Chinese people
Yeah,
in New
yeah,
Zealand,
believe it or not.
right,
And
from
then
the
later on,
1800s.
yes, it's late 1800s, I think. Wait, I don't remember exactly, but I know that in the 1800s they already had the first Chinese people to come, and then we had the racist, poll tax bills that came in late 1800s, early 1900s, right? But anyways, and then later on, I think then there was a larger quantity of Polynesians, right, coming from Samoa, Tonga, that actually came to settle in, let's say, the latter part of the 20th century, and a lot of them, then kind of became to be classed as the overstayers, but and
So
therefore you get actually
would you say New Zealand is a pretty diverse country then? Like is it
actually
mostly white people or is it like do you actually see a lot of different races
it
there?
is still mostly white because the thing is after the British, of course, came a lot of European immigration, right? But the thing is, due to the color of the skin, I think they weren't really, you know, as distinguishable, I'll say. So yes, most of New Zealanders are still New Zealand European. I think a good 70, I'll say 60, 70% of Kiwis are white, Pakeha, which we call them.
You call it what
And
pocket what?
Pakeha is the Maori word for New Zealand European white
Pocky
people.
Hallies?
Pakeha,
Okay.
Pakeha, yeah. And
That's a
so
great new insult for any of our listeners. If you want to, talk to a white guy on Twitter, it's like you're nothing. Just Pocky Ha.
yeah, well, it's just Maori word, isn't it? For yeah, to designate them, and then
There's not
like
enough insults for white people in English language, so we gotta get help from the Maoris.
well, you only have to remind me of my white classmate back in school that said, hey, white is right, and I didn't have anything to say back to that because it just rhymes so well, didn't it? White is right, and like no, but I credit you for that creativity.
Well, it rhymes, so it must be true.
Yeah, but no, but yeah, and so yeah, so you got the Maoris, which account for about 11-12% of the population. Sorry, no, take that back. That's the Asian. Sorry, Maori people are 16-17%, I'd say, and the Asian population is about 12% now, actually. And I forgot about the Pacific
16,
population.
16 to 17% are Maori, still
Yeah,
in New Zealand. That's really impressive because, like in America, like the Native American population has decreased to like I want to say under 2% or something like that.
oh,
So your natives actually like withstand history in New Zealand?
Again, it's a matter of I mean, again, it's tough to say that we've done everything right because it's definitely not right. I mean, for example, Māori lost their land up to only having I think 4% of the whole country's land being actually still belonging to them. But then again, having said that, the whole setting up the Waitangi Tribunal and whole I think push for reparations and actually supporting redressing any I guess historical wrongs has been I think a defining factor actually in comparing different indigenous populations' rights and I guess if you look at the Aborigines in Australia as well as the Native Americans in the States, you can say that New Zealand I think they've had a better I don't know if I can say treatment but better I guess
So there's no like
future.
so how did the Maori take it when the British just started coming? Did they welcome them? Did they
Oh
share
yeah,
their land?
there were the Maori land wars, yes.
Because
They
they knew that
were
like this would bring in more money or something.
I'm sorry.
Because they're welcoming to the British because they knew like this would be good for them because like it would bring them more money probably.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's not any different from the whole concept of of colonization of land and resources, right? Like that you saw with the British Empire all over the world. So yeah, of course it definitely benefited them. Yeah, but having said that, it is history, isn't it? It's what it is. And so moving forward, to come back to the whole idea of what it is to be a Kiwi again, it's actually quite interesting because there have been discussions, but I think pretty much latent ones because not many people have really kind of questioned and sort of put it to the front of what it actually means to be a Kiwi, right? Because like you said, also the fact that that New Zealand is becoming more and more diverse, that more than 1 in 4 people in New Zealand now are born overseas, that really tells you a lot, on how the face of New Zealand is definitely changing, definitely over the last 3 4
Are they just
decades.
taking in a bunch of immigrants now, like New Zealand? They're just
Uh,
is it easy to move there? Because I bet a bunch of Americans are going to try to move there after this.
yeah. Fun fact, I think it was a top Google search or something like that when Trump got elected in 2016. A lot of Americans wanted to move to New Zealand, and I think they still want to.
I mean, it's
um,
the best country right now for COVID. Like it's the lowest chance of getting it.
I mean, again, I think this whole COVID just reflects, the reality that was already set before, right? So it is true that even before COVID, that yes, New Zealand was lucky enough to boast one of the highest quality of living, right? Quality of life, um, and in terms of moving there, I mean, we're one of those people that that were able to, and I think now compared to before, of course, just like pretty much any other, I would say, developed country, it's tougher and tougher. But I think the possibilities are still there because the onus is on skills because a little bit of history again. I think in '87 or '88 when the Labour Party, Helen Clark's Labour Party came into government, they actually encouraged a more say I don't know more skills focused immigration policy, which focused on on bringing skilled migrants over, right? And so most of them actually then came from the Asia Pacific region because I think in '74 when the UK joined the European Union, New Zealand had to sort of switch focus, I guess, from having them as the longest serving trading partner to the Asia Pacific region, right? So then I think after that in that's why in the '80s you saw kind of this contemporary mass Asian migration, or the Asian invasion, I guess, of some actually came to know it by, and it created some social unrest and everything. Obviously. And so when I moved, anyways, it was still a time where things were still sort of sensitive, I would say, in terms of integrating this large mass
So
of
you moved after the Asian
migrants.
invasion.
After the heat of it, but still, I think in the midst of it, though, after the peak of it, but still, I think it was. Oh, I can't even say it was a peak because it was still definitely growing. But because in the '80s and '90s, definitely, it was when things was the face of New Zealand definitely, I think, had
So
to
so you could move to New
shift.
Zealand if you had a job lined up for you, right? Is that how your
Um,
parents moved to New
Not so
Zealand?
much. So my mom was a nurse, right? And so she had a nursing registration from the New Zealand nursing board. So she just went back to do a refreshers course to get back into the profession again because she actually took a break to race us and then did other things before coming back to nursing. And then after that, so thing about New Zealand is that I think a lot of people have done the same thing. They come, I guess, with the intention to actually study and or train in New Zealand, get that New Zealand experience that everyone talks about, and then later on, of course, have better opportunities, right, in terms of work. And so, in terms of I think profession wise, I think also anything to do with, I think, so to just do with skilled migrant categories, I think you get a better chance of being able to find something there. Having said that, there's been also a lot of a debate now over how there is a lot of the demand in the construction industry, and sort of non-white collar, industries, and so I'm not sure if that also means that that people coming from the outside would find opportunities there. That I'm not too sure of. But in conclusion, I know that like in terms of actually migrating, they still have the point system, and they still, I think, are largely directed towards the skilled categories. So yes, so like the educated 21st century sort of skills. So obviously nursing was and is still a big one that I can say that I'm lucky enough to have benefited from. Well, my mom and therefore us.
Yeah. So what was it like growing up in New Zealand? Like, so you moved to New Zealand when you were about 13 or 14. How old
That's
were
it.
you?
Yeah.
And then you're in this new country, and it's kind of interesting as a English, like it's a
Yeah.
British, a former British. What do you call it? Like when it's under the Queen?
Yeah. It's a Commonwealth country. It's a
Commonwealth. Yeah, that's
former
the word.
British colony. You're right.
Was it a culture shock to you, or were you able to get adjusted to it pretty quickly? Did you play rugby right away, or
So
listen
it's
to
funny.
Flight of the Conchords?
Well, there you go. You pretty much just enumerated, I think, the path of a Kiwi
Because
integration,
you
right?
moved to New Zealand right when they were becoming really famous, right? Like around 07-ish, 06-ish.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, that's something that you kind of learn as you go, right? But before I actually get into that, though, talking about the whole Commonwealth British Colony thing, it's kind of an interesting thing just to point out that during the 2010s, I'd say, during the previous Prime Minister's reign, John Key's, time in office, he actually tried to change the flag because you know how a flag is so similar to Australia's, having the Union Jack, as if it's a reminder of, yes, that we were part of the British Empire, right? And
Of
so,
course.
and then of course having the Southern Cross as well. So he actually tried to, he had a referendum to change the flag, and in the end, it didn't fly. So,
Just change it
um,
to a bird, right? With the kiwi.
out of the 30 odd 40 candidates, right, one of them actually put it in as a, I don't know if it was a joke, but it was a kiwi that shot laser out of its eyes as a flag. It's a fun thing to just look up. But
That's like Marvel actually bought the rights to that cartoon character. It's gonna be a
did it?
movie next year.
I
No,
didn't know
of course
that.
not. New
Oh.
Zealand, man? Like Captain New Zealand?
Yeah. By the way, yeah, Wakanda Forever though. Shout out to the Black
Chadwick.
Panther. Yeah. But anyway, but yes, of course, in terms of integration, I would say I remember my first day at school and how, again, I was still during that time where where New Zealand society in general was still getting used, right, to having people, just non-white people, let's say, to put it bluntly, right, coming in and populating the main, I guess, districts, main cities, main districts again, more so of Auckland, and therefore right where I guess I was, right, been going to this, I guess, one of the most, if not the most prestigious school in Auckland, being a state school still, but being the heart, I guess, of Auckland. So you saw that even the residents, um, the sort of households that I think that were in that certain suburb, right, was more and more filled by Asian households and Asian people and stuff, and not just
Was
Asian,
there
but I guess
actually any
non-white people.
animosity, or is it just more like, oh,
So
that's interesting? Like
that's
it's
the thing.
just
So
where
there
he
was a bit
lives.
of both. There was definitely mocking and jeering, but at the same time, I think it was also when you said culture shock, yeah, it was. I think I'm lucky to say there wasn't as much a shock, but just in terms of adaptation, it was a learning experience. So, for example, Asian people's, I guess not just Asians. Like if you talk about sure South Asian, meaning Indian people, you talk about Sri Lankan people, um, but just generally, Asian people in general, how like the culture is not to express oneself not to be modest, to be humble, not to sort of speak out, and kind of attract attention, right? But then you kind of realize that in New Zealand context, that's kind of how you earn respect, when you are able to express yourself, when you're able to stand up for yourself, and put your foot down, and that's how you're heard and listened to,
That's
and
how you get
so
respect in New Zealand, like getting into like arguments and fights and
no,
stuff.
no, definitely not, no, just kind of having an opinion and expressing that, right, assertively, confidently, and respectfully. I think respectfully, which is I think a main sort of factor as well. I think of what it is when you come back to what it is to be Kiwi, I'll say. To have that respect. And so, anyways, so yeah, I can remember my first day how like um, I think I sat there in class, and then next thing you know, these three white boys turned around and then like just asked me a bunch of questions, and I just answered them like yeah, like just like I would, and therefore that I think to me, if anything, was kind of the epitome of like my first test, if anything, of credibility of some sort.
Wait, let's
Because
paint the picture a bit. So you're 13 years old.
yeah,
You're what, eighth grade, sixth, seventh grade?
that's fourth form, year 10. I'm not sure. That's like your second year of high school out of 5 years.
Okay, so you're looking around the classroom. Are you the only Asian kid in the classroom when?
And that's the thing. I think a lot would have depended, I guess, on where you were, because I'm sure there were migrants that went to like all kinds of different corners of the country. But where I was, though, no, I was not the only one. I was surrounded by quite a few actually. But definitely it was a good mix though. But having said that, it was so different. Like for example, in that school, my being like grammar school, so they refer to you as by your surname, and then the teacher introduced me, and yeah. I can still remember, people always asking where we were from, right? Because obviously, again, then I also felt for the Asians of, second, third, fourth generation Asians that, were essentially Kiwis, but had to be asked whether they could speak English, because that again was the main thing, right? Where were you from, whether you could speak English or not. And so again, also being fortunate coming from another Commonwealth, British colony, another, English speaking country, and being educated in English, I guess that was a huge factor, right? Like in any country, I would say. It starts really with the language and therefore being able to integrate. So yeah,
Okay, so
but yeah,
they were asking you questions because you were the new kid. You were the new kid in class.
yeah,
So what
yep.
did the three white kids ask you?
Do you speak English? I was one of them. Where are you from? Do you speak English? Do you speak English? I don't know. I forget the other ones, but that was probably the ones that I remember, and the ones that came up a lot, obviously. And then obviously, like they ask you what your name is, and a lot of them will also ask you like, what's your real name though, because obviously, I can understand that, because from a standpoint of
Wait, so did you invent the name Jonathan when you moved to Singapore or New Zealand?
you see, I actually didn't. This is the thing, because I was born with that name. My parents gave me that name, but I know
Oh,
that
okay.
for a fact. A lot of Chinese people actually had to create their own names, I think, so because they found it interesting to have. I don't know, to think that people actually won't be able to pronounce their one syllable name, which is funny. I think. I don't know. You compare that to, I don't know, let's say McGonagall, for example. Sorry, that's a Harry Potter reference, right? But it's still a valid example. McGonagall compared to, I don't know, Lee or Sue Lee or something. You're like, come on. You don't need to be called Dragon or. Yeah, fun fact. I actually saw a guy called Dragon, a property agent. Dragon Wu.
He just wanted
Anyway,
to come up with an American or like an English sounding name right away, right?
yeah, but a lot of Johns here and there, a lot of anyway, but yeah, no, but I mean, in terms of integration, I call it integration because that I think essentially was it. I was fortunate to have a strong idea of where I was from, my roots, and to keep them and be proud of them, and also be respectful of of them, and therefore the culture that I was integrating into. So um, it was definitely it's still a ride, I'd say. It's not over yet, but I think with the time, with the years, it's definitely got better. I'd say there's more of an acceptance, right, that we live in a globalized community, multicultural society, and I think there's definitely a lot more of good that can come out of this, right, than animosity and misunderstanding. So
So that's just a part of the New Zealand personality, just more easygoing to new people that are
yeah.
different than you.
So there's this thing called Kiwi hospitality that I first learned about early on. So yeah, they were generally, I think, thought to be, yes, welcoming people and hospitable people, as they are, and easygoing, laid back, and therefore that actually I think also comes to define what it is to be Kiwi, to yeah, to kind of not taking so seriously, to have a sense of humor and be easygoing, and therefore, yeah, I can vouch for that. Yeah. But of course, ignorance is something that I've had to face, and we still fight against, right? I don't think the states is even, you know, immune to that, right? Isn't it? Uh,
Immune to
although,
ignorance.
yeah, well, and although I would say maybe it's more veiled. It has more of a PC veneer that sort of shades ignorant comments and remarks, right? I don't know if I'm mistaken there.
Well, what do you think is like the the stereotype of America? America's stereotype is like everyone kind of hates each other because they're all so different. And I
Well,
kind of
but
I kind of get that when like if your whole country is like different, it's harder to accept other people because like you're comfortable with your own people. But there's immigrants in every country, and it sounds like in New Zealand, that's not that much of an issue. Like you're actually more accepting of different races and stuff.
um, yeah, again, it comes with its challenges, right? I'm not gonna say it was just an easy ride because yeah, you still. I don't know if you still get that. I really wish they don't, anyways, to say these things. But getting things like go back to your country, right? Or like if you don't like things here, go back to your country, or like go back
But
to
I mean, you hear kids say that because kids are dumb. But like,
oh
would you hear
oh
like a 30-year
yeah
old or older
yeah
person?
yeah older people as well. I mean, and
Oh, that's unfortunate.
yeah, no, you get that, and then of course the whole thing of like where you're from. Of course, I get that, but then what about people who the fourth generation Kiwis? What's that supposed to mean? And again, kind of like racial slurs, ching chong, all that stuff, right? But
Well, go
uh,
back to where you're from is such an interesting thing to say because like New Zealand is where people immigrated to. Like even though like it might have been the 1800s, you still aren't originally from New Zealand
yeah,
unless you're
and I mean
Maori.
it's true. It's a younger country compared to the States, right? So I think when we compare these, utterances from here to there, it's in different context. But then again, like you're right on how, I think the basis of really New Zealand or already of any country is just the mobility of people. So yeah, I think about my classmate, this big burly 60-year-old Maori guy, Kamatua, which is like a I guess an older person, leader, guardian, or sort of a teacher, because of his age and his I guess standing in his community. But he's this big Maori guy with the facial tattoo, Tamoko,
He had a facial tattoo when he was 16.
No, no, he was a 6-year-old guy at the time, but I don't know how
Oh,
old he
16.
was when he got it young though. He got that facial tattoo young. And so I remember having this conversation and how he's saying yeah, like yes. He's referred to us as a Chinese, which is fine, fair enough. But he says like they're coming here, yes, they're taking over, yeah. But then I remember saying how but hey, I think we all come from somewhere at the end of the day, right? We all come from somewhere. And he's like yeah, and he actually understood that, and I respected that. He was able to accept still that that this is just a reality uh, of our country. And
So what do you say like distinguishes New Zealand from the other English-speaking countries? Because I
um
think it's probably like the least populated of like the Commonwealth countries. Like it's
um
so not a lot of Americans know much about New Zealand except it seems like a pretty happy place,
I mean
and
of the
there's no
Commonwealth
diseases out there.
countries, um I, I'm sure there are other little island countries that probably have a little small population, but I think if you talk about like the main, like I don't know, can't really say main, say
Like out of Canada,
developed
United States,
countries,
Great Britain, and
yeah, then yes.
Australia.
Yeah, developed countries. Yeah, we are. Actually, fun fact as well. We have this Five Eye network where we share intelligence information between the states, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. So I think we should also say that, which means that when you guys come in, I don't know if it's definitely not right because of that. When you guys come into the country, you can go through the little auto gates, right? And so you don't actually have to go through people. You can just have that little chip thing, scan your passport. Uh, anyways. But yeah, so in terms of this community, yes, we are the smallest, but how it is different? Well, on a lighter note, I think to start off with, we can talk about the accent. It's it's a it's an interesting accent. It's British English, yes. But the E's and I's, I guess, I think elements of the pronunciation that really stand out. So, for example, we kind of switch the pronunciation of both. So, eggs, eggs is pronounced eggs, and like uh,
But you
let's
say
say
eggs in New Zealand, or do you say eggs?
they say I don't know, they have a tendency to kind of say to pronounce the e as an I, like say eggs more than eggs, or like
Oh,
bed more than bed, and um and like on contrary, like six instead of six, or you know um uh, hit instead of hit. For example, this good anecdote as well. I had a language teacher, right? He said that he was actually complaining of the fact that when he went to the States, right? He went to the States and he wanted to get a box of pins. Uh,
fins?
sorry, he wanted to get a box of uh, yes, he wanted to get a box of pins. Sorry, pens, right? Like
Oh, pens.
pen
Okay.
they write
Yeah.
on. So he said a box of pins, and so then he got a box of pins instead, which is a box of pins that pins to kind of pin stuff on, pin like I don't know, paper or whatever onto the wall. So pin and pin is another one of those. Um,
Well, he should have
yeah,
learned
so he actually
proper English in the first place. That's his fault.
so well, there you go. But that's just a pronunciation thing. But I mean, apart from that, though, yeah, I mean, people liken our accent to the Australian one, but I'll say that it's roughly similar, and even culturally speaking as well. Yes, roughly similar as well. But I'll say they were probably a bit more laid back than them, and we're definitely better at sport.
More laid back and better at sport.
Yeah.
So you're like the
And
Hawaii of Australia. Not saying that
the what?
Hawaii
Sorry.
is good at sports, like the Hawaii
The
of
Hawaii
Australia.
of Australia. Fun fact again, in the 2012 Olympics, I think in London, when at the beginning of it, when New Zealand actually attained more gold medals than Australia, one of the Australian newspapers actually tried to combine us and put Aus Zealand to put us in the top 10, and we're like, what the hell, how dare you claim us? And there are jokes as well of one day Australia actually kind of like I don't know annexing New Zealand, but it's just
Is
it's
there is
like
there actually animosity between New Zealand and Australia, or is it just more like a
um
friendly rivalry?
I think yeah, like I said, it's more of a, it's more fr- it's more of a fraternity, I'd say. I mean, lately, definitely in politics, right? It's definitely probably where you get the animosity come from. And like there are a lot of New Zealanders actually living in Australia. So yeah, I mean, another fact about being a New Zealander, you actually uh get to live and work in New Zealand. Sorry, in Australia, forever, because there's this trans-Tasman agreement that says that Australians can come to New Zealand to stay, live, work, and vice versa, right? And so there are a lot of Kiwis, obviously, who settle to Australia, like how in the US you guys might maybe move to I don't know, maybe Europe or something, or I don't know where you go. Canada. I'm not sure for a better future. I don't know if you do that
I mean,
mostly.
so like the visa to go to like for a Canadian to come to America, the visa is like slightly easier if you have a job.
Right, right.
But I think there's it sounds like Australia and New Zealand are way more friendly than America and Canada because Canadians act like the good brother in versus America because like everyone wants to be Canadian right now, but like they mock Americans because they think Americans are dumb. But is there a mutual respect in New Zealand, or is it like
I think it's definitely more respectful. I mean, if anything, coming from our point of view, like I say, one of the sort of defining characteristics, I guess, of what it means to be Kiwi as well, is just to to have that respect anyway. So I don't think we see that, but I think I was kind of referring more to the economic prospects though of being able to move to Australia and and work and live, I guess, in the bigger countries with more opportunity. So you get a lot of Kiwis moving to Australia and living there. So, but I guess politically speaking, lately though, there's been a bit of a tension where a lot of the Kiwis that that are living there who have committed crimes, right, have been deported. But a lot of them actually maybe even moved there when they were so young that they essentially grew up Australian. So, and then I think the fact that Kiwis there don't get unemployment benefits, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of tension there. But having said that, though, for the large part, we're close partners, we're close allies, and when you see Kiwis and Australians, hanging out overseas, pretty
are
much.
there like stereotypes that you guys mock each other for? Like Americans think Canadians are very like slow talking. That was southern, but like
um, I always thought that you guys thought that Canadians were just polite, too polite. Is that one
yeah,
of the
overly
stereotypes?
polite. Yeah, that's the stereotype for Canadians, and then Canadians think Americans are too they talk too fast and they're rude and stuff like that. Is there anything that New Zealanders think
uh,
Australians are, and vice versa?
know that well we probably think of them as looser. Just it's crazy, right?
Crazy.
Going further, like challenging the extremes more than we would, just Um, but apart from that, though, I don't think so. I don't think we have other sort of stereotypes. I think. I guess I can't think of anyone saying this right now. No, but just definitely, just loosely cunts is what I'd call them, man. They
Yeah,
definitely
and
go
another
for.
thing about yeah, you guys, you're way more profane, or you're more free with the liberal with the profanity.
See, that's the thing. If you think that we profane are just okay with being, profane, they are definitely worse.
Okay,
um,
so they definitely do sound like the America of the two of you guys, because
I'll say
you're
so. I guess so. I guess so. We're definitely more laid back. Yeah, that's another stereotype that if you compare that, yeah, we're just more chilled, more uh I'm not gonna say respectful because it might be disrespectful to say respectful, but definitely just seem I guess kind of more relaxed and just decent in that respect. I'll say. Uh, and I guess in terms again more in terms of um I guess acceptance, of other races and cultures. It's kind of an ironic thing because obviously they have a lot more immigration from elsewhere, but it's always been said anyways that Kiwis are sort of more um, open, let's say, to diversity and to different races and cultures. That's what they say.
you can
I
say it.
haven't.
You can say it. New Zealand's less racist than that's true.
Like I say, I mean, I think is I haven't. I mean, I met Australians. Obviously, I haven't been to Australia though, so
Okay,
yeah, I might find
so
out.
I'm sorry for any Australians listening. Like that was an overgeneralization. Johnson's
I
never even
mean,
been to your country.
that's what they say. That's why I said what's what they say. I can only speak for us, right? But yeah. Then again, yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess to sum it up.
Are there any big issues in New Zealand? Because like from the sounds of it, it's just like the perfect country from all the
I
things.
I
Right?
think it definitely is. I think rosy eye to at best, right, to say that it is the best country because it again. I think we're pretty much. I think it's just a matter of us situation, the context of us being a small country in the Pacific, but punching above its weight in a few things. For example, yes, like it's talk about the COVID handling. You talk about um, I think the last big moment probably is pretty much when we rejected any nuclear um, ships, I think, docking in New Zealand because, I think at the time there was conflict between the French, I would say, because they had been testing their nuclear arsenals in the Pacific. It's much to do with, New Caledonia as well and French Polynesia as well, being where they kind of, were based. And so, yeah, we had this moment where we actually would say, hey, no, no, we definitely are rejecting nuclear energy, therefore no nuclear ships would come and dock in New Zealand. So but these little moments I think in history that kind of like put us on the on the map, so to speak. But having said that, of course, yeah, there's also rugby and sport, but but having said that, I think we've always been aware that we are still we are where we are, and so I think we are just aware and fortunate of us doing well, and yeah, and so if we actually boast a good standard of living that attracts people, then hopefully that continues, right? Because I'm not going to lie that we still have challenges right ahead. I think domestically
So
as well.
so what's like a domestic, like something that like normal New Zealanders have to face that like maybe people aren't
Believe,
aware of as an issue?
good question. Believe it or not, they actually I think hundreds of thousands of children that actually would say go to school hungry, right? So a lot of them actually you know like yeah I'd say living below the poverty line, I'd say. So there is actually poverty, believe it or not, in New Zealand. There's and also
Yeah.
a growing amount of poverty, and that actually is affected by growing amounts of inequality between between classes. So that there's a problem that's actually plaguing us as well. So
So
it's
there's
not.
class isn't there like welfare or like housing vouchers in New Zealand if
There
you're
is welfare.
yeah.
I mean, so we came off the back of 9 years. So I don't want to get partisan, but we came off the back of 9 years of national government, which is the conservative right wing party, right? So and so Labour and Jacinda Ardern, which is our prime minister, who's our prime minister now, she came in yes with the promise of ensuring that no child will have to grow up hungry ever in New Zealand, and that housing was, if anything, I think the pillar of her a campaign saying that that they'll build how many was it? 10 million? How many houses was it? Um, 10,000 houses in 10 years or something like that. It was a big figure. It was a promise, but
Ten
now
thousand doesn't sound that big, John.
and
In
then it must
ten
have been
years.
100,000. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up the figures. I think it was 100,000 in 10 years, something like that. It was a big figure, right? But at the same time, that was obviously what a lot of critics would say a pipe dream now, because now only a few hundred have been built since her mandate in 2017, and so and of course, with rising housing prices, especially in Auckland, right, a lot of people of our generation have not been able to own our first
Yeah.
home yet, obviously from foreign expectations.
So a New Zealander of our generation, would they stay in New Zealand, or is there just more opportunities in, let's say, England or United States?
So traditionally, there's this thing about going on your OE, on your overseas experience. So a lot of them actually go to Australia, most of all, and then they also do go to the UK, which is also a big
Is that
experience.
common for like
So
most New Zealanders, or is it just like the richer ones that can just fly somewhere?
so um I would say fortunately most of them actually I think have that access to be able to, if anything, go to Australia and apply it out there and figure it out there. Obviously try their luck and get some work experience, right? And of course, the more fortunate ones would then also have a chance to go to the UK. But more and more so now, I think you get Kiwis going, I think, to other places now. So I think Europe still, I think, is a huge one, and the US as well. Of course, it's always been, it is still honestly the, well, not about now, but it's always been the the MVP, the destination to.
It's the destination if you're rich, like if you or you have a good job, because like the taxes are pretty
Well,
low.
but that's I think the power of I mean, I think pop culture, and I mean not just that. I mean, still those opportunities, right? The states still is the land of opportunity. I think for really, a lot of people, because of just the sheer amount of possibilities, right? That you guys offer. I don't know, in terms of education, definitely, which is the main one, and of course in terms of employment. But then again, yeah, I mean, still most people from New Zealand still, if they were to go overseas, they go to Australia, right? And
Did
I
they
hope
come
that
back
that's.
to New Zealand after they find themselves in
I mean, most
Australia?
of them do, I would say, but a lot of them, there's still quite a lot of people, a lot of Kiwis that still live and settle in Australia, right? But I think, yeah, it's something also that I personally would love to see change, and and try to help change as well, and see more Kiwis, actually going to other destinations, namely the developing world, right? Not so much to the traditional English-speaking, the developed country status sort of thing, destinations. Yeah, but that's how it is. Yeah. But yeah, so we talk about inequality, we talk about the housing crisis, talk about a
Okay,
lot of
so like
the
let's get into so like is it actually affecting a lot of the population? Like what percentage do you think is actually poor in New Zealand?
few hundreds of thousands. I mean, it's not um it's a portion. See, it's tough because when you say it's a minority, I think it implies that it shouldn't be that important, but it is obviously. So and it's, I think, more than a country like New Zealand should be, if anything, because having its the kind of quality of life and living standards that it boasts definitely shouldn't have to have
So
people
so
live.
if you're unemployed in New Zealand and like you might be poor, does the government provide you with you
Yes,
know a cash assistance for food and a
yeah,
house?
there's a benefit system, right? Job seeker support and all that. But then again, you also do see a large and growing number of homelessness, right? So that kind of tells you that I guess it's not a yeah, I guess not like a well established solution, to speak, to say the least, right? Because there's that welfare system there, and there's that, but at the same time, how is it that more and more people now are homeless and on the streets, right? So that's something definitely wrong there. Um, and so on that note as well, that's the just Island government actually released this well-being budget, right? So they actually have made it clear, and hopefully, I mean, it really lives to outlast her time in government. I mean, Labour's time in government. That this budget that I think aims to improve Kiwis' well-being in terms of health, in terms of I think the living conditions and situations, housing, for example, healthy, warm houses and all that. In terms of I think having healthcare, being more of an emphasis, mental health especially, than just pure economic growth. That I think was the point of this budget, and I really hope that is able to play out. Because on the last thing I'd say, when mental health, I think brought that to my mind, was that New Zealand actually has, I think, one of the highest, if not the highest, suicide rate in the OECD. See, that again also then kind of tells you, right, for a country like that, with
that's really unexpected.
it is not all people expect, right? So
Is mental health provided by the government too? Like, I know you have free healthcare. Could you see a
that's a good
psychiatrist
question.
for free?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's actually covered, because we have this thing called ACC, which is, I think, which is accident compensation, and I should know this, ACC, accident care compensation, something like that, wherein, like, if you were to get hurt, for example, in an accident of sort, or really any sort, the government covers for that, right? So I mean, your healthcare, in terms of the taxes that you pay, you have a levy that you have to pay, and therefore that goes to the ACC. So if you get hurt, you have to get operated or whatever, and go through physio later on. It's all covered by healthcare, by socialized healthcare. But in terms of mental health, in terms of therapy, I believe that it is, although I cannot actually confirm that because I'm not sure. Yeah, again, I don't know as well if there's certain like the natures of psychological healthcare needs that are covered and some that are not. I should don't know about that. So yeah, but I really hope they are, though. Is it covered in the States? I mean,
Of course
sorry,
not. Nothing's covered in the States.
in your healthcare, I mean, that you pay, in your health insurance that you pay, is
You know
mental
what?
health.
I guess I didn't do enough research because I don't know. Like, I don't know how much it would cost. But
I mean, it's just, sorry.
I'm doing fine though because I get to talk to you every week. Like,
Oh
what's
yes.
better than that?
Yeah, which is why who needs to be a PhD in psychology to be a good friend,
Just
huh?
gotta talk to some dude from New Zealand. So I guess like my last question would be like, what do you want to see in the future of New Zealand? I, like less poverty, less homelessness, or
So,
do you wish that they would have more industries that attract young people to come to New Zealand, or like what do you want?
I mean, that's you know that's a lot of things that we will all hope for New Zealand. I mean, you said it right. You said it's more more of a support for, let's say, for the young tech startups, for example, for young professionals to come in and contribute to the workforce, and more than that, I think the social fabric of the country. More talent. That's definitely something that's always good to attract, right? And you talk about, yes, better well-being, more focus on on the housing situation, on ensuring proper healthcare to everyone. I think regardless of where you live and all, which is all definitely things that not just, I think, this New Zealand, but I think any country should really hope for and strive for. But for me personally, I've always been I always had a cause bigger than myself, bigger than the country in the world, that is to to ensure, to fight for empathy, right, for social cohesion, and so I think it's also all personal, isn't it? That gives you kind of more of a drive to want to see that come to fruition. So for example, I don't want to have people, let's say, like myself, who are migrants, but also people who have been living how many generations in New Zealand, to be able to, I don't want them to be able to you know to be told to go back to where they come from, man. To be asked, like, whether they fucking speak English, or to be asked if Jonathan's their real name. I mean, you know what I mean? But
I mean,
so for
one
me,
day as the world becomes smaller, I think it's
yeah.
that's probably gonna be less of an issue, just because like you're more able to interact with people, especially with the internet. Like you can literally see people like from every
See,
country.
that is the assumption, right? And I think, generally speaking, yes, we're going to tend towards that. Generally speaking, yes. But at the same time, I think if our most, I guess, recent history has taught us anything, is that that cultural social integration isn't going to come automatically. It really is going to take effort. It's going to take work. And so if anything, I do hope for people to be more curious and be more open to wanting to be wanting to to meet difference and find similarity, maybe, actually. And therefore, I think at the end of all this, be able to, I think, define better what it means to be Kiwi, right? And kind of, I think, improve on the cohesion that I think that we enjoy, I guess, so much already up to date. You see, not to take it for granted.
Is New Zealand the country you see yourself settling up in? Like
Yeah,
settling down in? Sorry, not
I
settling
feel
down.
like I've always said that regardless of of whatever that goes on, it is a great country to I mean one of the best really to live in. Therefore, to also to raise a family in and to to also eventually retire. And so I do see myself going back and definitely contributing in things that I've learned in life and doing that with the silver thread on my chest. Yeah, because we talk about drinking water, for example, from the tap. You talk about fresh air. You talk about, you know, just being safe in these little things that people just take for granted. And talk about opportunities, right, that are abound. New Zealand is a great place to have all that. So hopefully we improve on that.
Yep, and I think one day Jonathan will be, settling down in New Zealand, and then he'll be the normal person, and he won't be asking that Chinese kid, "Where are you from?" Because he knows that Chinese kid is from New Zealand. And on that note, it's time to end the show. This has been Jono Live There. Thank you for listening. See you next week.